Good morning and welcome to the NBA Daily. Coming up, the Pistons are still streaking. The Knicks got a little bit scared. And and Zena had a chance to sit down with Jake Rogal, the director of the Court of Gold Olympics documentary. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Zena.
Morning, Dave.
Another night, another big win for our Pistons.
Hey.
Wow. How about that? They are streaking. This is the hottest team in basketball right now. Their 8th straight win. They pick it up over the Boston Celtics. And it wasn't even close, Zena. They got this thing done pretty early. Joe Mazzulla was waving the white flag early on. I actually thought he pulled it a little bit early. Like this team can hit a lot of threes in a short amount of time. You think you'd give them a chance, but no, they got out of there. This is the longest winning streak for the Pistons since 2008. They snapped a 12-game losing streak to the Celtics. The Pistons are here, Zena.
They are. And the crazy part is that Boston was also here for Detroit. I mean, they shot 43% almost from three. So it wasn't a factor of the Boston not being themselves. It was just a factor of Detroit being better at being themselves. They were slicing up the paint, ended up with 62 points in the paint. They also played tremendous defense. Like Asar Thompson, we just talked about him this week. We're going to keep talking about him. Why not? Because he continues to be a pest, a thorn in everyone's side. He did go down with an injury. We're not sure what's going on there. But before he went down, him and his team all night long in passing lanes, forcing everyone to go the way that they want to go. They were just making everything sped up for the Boston Celtics. Detroit really showed out tonight and also showed out for the national stage. So anyone that was doubting, is this streak a fluke? Is this, they showed up tonight.
Well, they showed out in a big game, but let's just be honest here. This game should have probably been flexed to national TV, and it wasn't. Instead, it was Sixers Knicks, which wound up being a good game, and we'll get to that in a minute. But the Pistons, this is a win that I think I'm glad that you put it this way because they showed who they are. The first quarter run that they went on to close the first quarter, it was keyed by Malik Beasley. I mean, he missed a shot that he probably took his time on a little bit too long, gets his own rebound and sticks it. And this guy is having, what was the stat that you gave me the other day? The shooting stats that he put up?
In that 7-game win streak before last night's win, 51% from three.
Yeah.
So he's just continuing that going on. But yes, that step back, getting your own shot, looking down, let me take a step back and do it again is not only hard, it is confident.
Yeah.
Okay. The whole, you got a reset clock. You're all good to go. No. I know it's going in. Don't worry. I got you. And his team everybody also knew. Yeah.
Everybody's watching you, right? Like, cause you just missed the one. So he had 26, 6 of 11 from three. And Zena, I had this thought and I'm not sure about it yet. Like I'm workshopping this idea, but they are better when Malik Beasley's on the court. I wonder if this isn't the situation by the time we get to the playoffs, if he doesn't maybe supplant Tim Hardaway Jr. in the starting lineup. Now, I understand again, this team is good. They're on a streak. No one is changing anything anytime soon, and they maybe shouldn't, but that's something I think is like, it's one of those adjustments when we get to playoff time, because this is a playoff team. It's a really good team that they might be able to make. But with the shooting like that coming off the bench, I also understand, having that option. Cade Cunningham with another good game. And, I want to just swing this to the Boston side for a second. 17 turnovers, not really like them, but we've
6 in the first quarter as well.
Right. And we've seen the season where they've been a little bit out of sorts. A lot of people have talked about how they find the Celtics boring when they watch them. And I kind of understand it, right? Like they shoot a lot of threes. They're really good. So that they're going to win most of their games, but it's kind of the same. But are the Celtics bored themselves a little bit with this play style, right? Because they kind of become disengaged a little bit when
interesting,
right? Like I'm feeling that, and it's also the dog days.
Yeah, I think it's the dog days for sure. I also think that the Boston Celtics are a system team. Everyone works within their role within the system. And so that can sometimes be boring when you don't have a superstar that kind of ascends over everyone, when you don't have a Jalen Brunson with the Knicks, who we'll get to in a second, right? That kind of gets boring. And, we talked about this before this show. When you have a system, that means that on any given night, if someone's off, someone else can pick up the slack. Yeah. That feels like, man, we don't miss our superstar. It's just like, no, this is the same old consistent, regular play from the Celtics. And so when you see that, that's what I think you get bored, because it's a good thing, though. The Celtics are consistent, and they also have jack of all trade kind of players.
Yeah, it's a luxury to have, for sure, that your floor is as high as theirs is. Let's talk about the Knicks, because they had another game that was unnecessarily close. And Zena, I'm at the point, I'm going to put my conspiracy hat on here for a second and say that this is a conspiracy by the New York Knicks to boost Jalen Brunson's chances of an MVP or boost him up the MVP ladder, make sure he wins the Clutch Player of the Year award, because this guy is ridiculous. Now, number one, he takes the toughest shots in the league, every single shot that he takes, but especially in crunch time, because he's getting the ball, and he was clearing out on these guys at the end of the game. Zena puts up a personal 9-0 run to seal the deal. But Jalen Brunson, I mean, he's the most clutch guard for sure in the league right now. And respect to Kyrie Irving, I just think when you look at the way that the Knicks have been winning, the way they've been leaning on him, maybe he should be getting some MVP buzz. I mean, of course, he's not going to win it, but what he's doing down at the end of games is pretty incredible.
I was looking this up because it is ridiculous how much Jalen Brunson, one, finds himself in clutch situations, two, finds himself burdening the close of games in clutch situations. But this season, Jalen Brunson has been in 21 clutch games, and he's averaging the most amount of points for anyone that's had more than 2 games, at 5.5 points in that. Like, that is significant. When you're talking about 5 minutes left in the game, you're scoring over almost 6 points for your team. Like, that can be the ball game difference. And so that's the kind of leadership and the type of confidence that, Jalen exudes, essentially.
Yeah.
And so
onions,
it's really,
as we like to say. Yeah, right. Like, he's willing to take those big onion shots.
Yeah.
And we gotta mention Paul George put up 25 points in his first post podcast game. Paul George announces he's no longer going to podcast. And Zena, I went and did the math, not because I'm petty, but because I'm curious.
Okay.
He posted 17 podcasts this season. All right. Now that's less than we do in a month. So he's not like prolific, but that's 17 podcasts.
But that's significant for an NBA player.
Absolutely. The 76ers with Paul George in the lineup have only won 14 games. I think that is a pretty good sign. Yeah, the podcast needed to die.
You sure you're not being petty?
I mean, I'm just I'm just curious.
Well, that's a problem. And the fact that, it's been a month since he scored 25 points.
Yeah.
Maybe locking in, putting the podcast to the side, allowing the podcast P family to do their thing while he focuses on his Sixers family. Hey, maybe it's going to work, because the fight that the Sixers had tonight was surreal. The only reason that I was like, maybe we can see this is because I feel as if they have a point to prove, and I will give them that credit. Maxey, Kelly Oubre Jr., Paul George, all came out to play tonight. They were the bulk of the points for the Sixers. Couldn't get the win, but put up a serious fight.
Yeah, they had to show up, especially after Paul George in their game the other night said that this team isn't prepared, isn't ready, isn't a real playoff team, or any, all of the other things that he kind of said.
He held his team accountable.
Yeah, they're not ready. Before we go to break and come back for the interview with Jake Rogal, we got to talk about Shaedon Sharpe. Number one, probably had the best game of his career last night in a Blazers win. But the bigger thing, if you haven't seen the dunk, go and find it. Shaedon Sharpe absolutely just ends Bub Carrington's. We're not going to get too serious. Did it in his career, but he's certainly ruined his night and put him on a poster. My question to you, Zena, is that the dunk of the year?
It's got to be top 2. And the only one that I have above that is Gary Payton II on Isaiah Hartenstein.
Everybody's going to call you a homer.
I know they are.
But
I will say this. I will say this about the Shaedon Sharpe dunk. The way that man cocked it back, it was ancestral. He dug into his lineage to get the vengeance and power to come back at the basket. It was surreal. And to do that off of a turnover. Thank you for that.
Made a great
Shaedon.
play.
Thank you.
Just jumped the passing lane, takes off, and Bub, you know what? respect, man. Way to get up there.
You
try to
it.
block that. That's right. You
there
try to block that. That's how we do it. Guys, stick around after the break. S and Zena, this interview honestly is fantastic and makes me want to go and watch the documentary all over again. So you guys enjoy that. Thank you guys for listening.
Last summer, we were privy to one of the best, if not the best, basketball tournament of all time with the 2024 Olympics. And a couple of weeks ago, we got to relive it with Court of Gold on Netflix, which was absolutely incredible. And we're joined by the creator, Jake Rogal. And look, like watching this doc back as a Canadian, obviously heartbroken through the whole thing. But on top of that, I think the thing that shocked me was the access, the level of access that you guys got throughout this whole tournament for all four teams, which was the US, Canada, Serbia, and France. That felt unprecedented to me with the way that the league works and a lot of these players work. How did you guys get that level of access?
There's a lot of layers to that. I think it started with Connor Schell, who runs a company called Words and Pictures in New York. He's the former head of ESPN. I work for Words and Pictures, and Connor was putting all these deals in place before I joined the company. So he was talking to all the federations, to USA Basketball, to the NBA, to the IOC. So Connor really started the access conversation. And then the IOC being open, which they, are notoriously private, that was a big part of it. And then once they did all that amazing work together to kind of put us in the positions, it was on the ground level, just getting the trust of the teams and the coaches. Really what the IOC said was, we'll put you in the best place we can to get you in the faces of the players. But from there, you got to be respectful and let them dictate what you can shoot and what you can't. And we took it a step at a time. We just went to the coaches and said, we are here to document something. We're not going to make you do anything you wouldn't normally do. We understand you have a tournament to win. We understand your family is here. We understand you have 1,000 things to do, and making a documentary is probably the 1,000th thing on your list, and we respect that. But we'd love to just be a part of this. So it was started very high up with Connor and then kind of worked down to me and on the ground trying to navigate the emotion of it all.
I feel like you kind of alluded to the conversations that you had in order to get people comfortable with how much vulnerability was displayed on this doc. It's one thing to have access, but to have access to some of the emotional capacity that you captured. When you started this project and you anticipated getting some interviews, did you anticipate Kevin Durant opening up like that, Bam Adebayo opening up in that way, just being able to have these vulnerable moments captured?
No, I don't think you can anticipate that. I think I've never been to an Olympics before. This was my first experience there. So right when the tournament starts, in not just the basketball tournament, just the Olympics overall, there is a ton of emotion right away. I mean, the opening ceremony, and they're on the river, and Celine Dion's there, and the Eiffel Tower is illuminated. You immediately are emotional. So you start from a place of emotion. And then I think when you're in it, you're in this sort of like bubble of emotion where nothing else in the world is going on. So it's a ripe environment for some of that emotion to come out. And I think the job is to make people know that you can be comfortable being emotional in that environment. And if you feel emotional, it's not unique. Everyone in there feels emotional. And showing that is cool. And it's relatable. And I think when people open up like that, as you saw with the reaction to Kevin crying, people like that. And it's because we all feel that way a lot of the times. And so when you show it, it makes you feel human and it humanizes the person showing it. So I think just making people comfortable in what's already an emotional environment is kind of the trick there.
Yeah, I think it also helped audience and the fans to sort of see Kevin in a different light and respect him in a different way. I think I can speak for a lot of people where it's like you really change your perspective on a lot of these players, like Zena mentioned. And I think the fact that one of the other unique things about this doc was it took 4 different perspectives, right? The US was obviously the main perspective, but you had Canada, you had Serbia, you had France. How did you guys nail down those 3 other teams in terms of picking which teams could kind of go far in this tournament? And were you guys silently rooting for some of these teams to make it further, to make this thing worthwhile?
Yeah. So I'll into the first part with the teams. So again, this was Connor and a lot of conversations happening without me there. But Team USA was the obvious choice because win or lose, they had to be in it. And they're kind of the story, the Great White Shark. France was another pretty obvious choice because they're the home country, silver medal in the Tokyo Olympics. Victor Wembanyama being one of the biggest stars in the game, that's kind of an obvious choice. Those last two spots, though, Canada was more obvious than people would think. I think because they had, I think it was the second most NBA players behind the United States in their team.
Yep.
You have Shea. They have a basketball history that's pretty interesting that people don't really know about. And so I think Canada became like a pretty obvious third choice. And then the fourth choice we debated for a long time, and I was part of that discussion. And it was which countries have the most interesting stories that you want to let the world know and who actually have a chance. And Serbia came to mind, one, because of the rich basketball history and the war and just how compelling that story is, but also because they won the silver medal at the FIBA World Cup in 23 without Jokic. So you add the best player in the world to a team that's already successful, you think like, okay, that could go well. As far as who we're rooting for, immediately the groups were made, and it was USA and Serbia in one group, so we knew they'd be playing each other. And then as the tournament unfolded, you have Canada and France in the first game of the knockout round. So there's conflicting feelings all over the place because you develop relationships with people on every team. So it's like you're happy that Wemby won because you love him, but you're sad that Shea lost because you love him. And it's like there's no rooting for anybody. The hope is like, I hope one of our teams goes far. That was always like, what if none of our teams go far? And with the U.S., you're making some good bets. But there's a world in which that happens. And then what do you do? So, I think that naturally you have people you're rooting for. But I don't think there was one team that we were all hoping would prevail.
Okay, maybe not one team that you're hoping to prevail, but which team was the most fun to be around?
Yeah.
I have a thought, but I want to know what your
I want to hear your thought first, and I can tell you whether it's true or not.
What's your bet? Yeah.
I'm thinking Serbia. I'm thinking they were a good time, particularly because as the U.S. and France were battling for their lives, Serbia's been drunk for 24 hours. So I want to know if it was Serbia that was the most fun.
So Max Gershberg, who was the lead producer on the show, his job in Paris was to get the Serbians to warm up to him and that crew. And it was the hardest assignment of the whole project because the Serbians were the most serious. Coach Pesic ran a very, very tight ship. And I think that Max had to do a lot of work to convince those guys that this was worth their time. So the Serbians were actually one of the harder ones to crack because the tone that Coach Pesic set was nothing matters besides basketball. And I don't care if you're in Paris and your family's here. You need to go run on the track more instead of go have dinner with them. So they were fun once they won a medal. They were very fun. But that was the last day one of the last days we were shooting. I think that the Canadians were the loosest team. Like they had cool music playing at practice. They were very they had a swagger about them that just kind of jumped out. And maybe Shea led that charge. They were cool, man. I think Shea set the tone of just Jordy is a really cool dude. He's very human. The French were also really fun to be around. Boris Diaw, we got really close with, who's awesome, but they had a lot of pressure on them. And anytime they left where they were, the media was insane around them. So I think it was harder for them to kind of let loose. And then the USA basketball team was so fun to be around, but they had so much attention that it was hard to gain the access there because just everyone was trying and you were one of 100 people trying to get in with them. So each team had a different personality.
That's awesome to hear because I guess hanging out each day, you didn't know what you were going to get, right? There's this unexpected mystery to okay, what does today have for us when you're trying to, it's sort of a moving target storytelling wise. And I think one of the cool things about it is, at least from watching it from the outside perspective, you're wondering what was left. What did you guys not put in the doc? Because there's so many moments that were captured. Steph, KD, and LeBron celebrating, obviously the incredible USA-Serbia game. But what was the moment that or maybe the moment that you wish was in that doc that wasn't?
Yeah, there's two that come to mind. One is we shot Greece qualifying for the Olympics. And that was cool because you saw Giannis in the locker room. And they're all spraying champagne. Yeah. And it was awesome. But we needed to get to the tournament, early on because we had so much to cover. We couldn't really fit it in. And then the moment between Ant and President Obama, that night we shot a dinner afterwards with the president and Team USA, which was amazing. But we just didn't have room for it in that moment because, again, we had to just get to the Olympics. Right. So those two moments really come to mind. But I really think our team did an awesome job of getting the best stuff in because a lot of these docs we shoot over the course of 2 or 3 years, and you have a ton of footage to work with. And while we did shoot a lot, it was only from June 24 to December 24. So it's actually not as much as you would think. And so we really just picked the best moments and tried to build the series around those moments and sort of tentpole them throughout the series.
Ant trash talking Obama is amazing. Was just awesome.
No, it was not. It was so awkward. I had such cringe in that moment. I was like, this is the president. Ant, what are you doing?
Let me take some of your cringe away, because I think it speaks volumes to who both of them are. Where President Obama is creating an environment where guys are comfortable enough being themselves. He could easily come in and be like, I'm the president. Right. How dare you talk to me that way? But he didn't. He was cool. And he was actually kind of like getting more out of Ant by bringing LeBron in and be like, you already said? So he's creating a comfortable environment for Ant, which shows how cool President Obama is. Then Ant is being completely himself, because that's what makes Ant great. Yeah. And he's comfortable being himself no matter who he's in front of, whether it's us or the president. And so it shows how cool Ant is. So while I understand it's like shocking and kind of uncomfortable, they're both so cool in that moment for creating the moment. And doing it and knowing we were there, it's a cool. I feel like it was a cool moment.
I mean, it is absolutely dope that Ant Edwards is as confident as he is, as young as he is, and a person like President Obama doesn't like faze him. I think that just like, particularly in the Black community, we're like, respect your elders. What is happening?
But that's Ant's way of being respectful.
There you go. Speaking of respecting your elders, I did a show with Chris Mullin from the Dream Team last night. And I told him that I was speaking to you this morning, Jake. And I was like, any thoughts on like Doc or any questions you want me to ask? And he was like, thinking about like The Last Dance, which you also produced, and thinking about this documentary, how much did you, in terms of making a decision of content that you wanted to incorporate, how much of the Dream Team story did you consider for this story to be able to tell the setup for Court of Gold? Because of course, Last Dance was all in retrospect, as opposed to in-person live content that you could utilize outside of interviews. That was all you had for The Last Dance. Versus this, you had so much content in the moment, but there is this historical context that you had to set up. So how did you balance that in terms of being able to tell that story and setting up the importance of this particular Olympics?
Yeah, it's really hard. Episode 1 was the last episode we finished, because you're just constantly making sure the setup is accurate to what you're showing. I think what you want to do is, for basketball fans, the Dream Team has been covered ad nauseum. Like, everyone knows the Dream Team in every detail, in every game, and the Monaco practice and all that. So the basketball fans, the NBA fans, need to see it from a different perspective, which is like you're telling the Dream Team story because you're showing how the world is catching up. Right. For the non-basketball fans, you have to give them enough information to understand what the Dream Team was for the context of the show, and then move on to the show. So it's a balance of like, how much do you incorporate? But because there have been multi-part series docs on the Dream Team, so you could technically do one. You don't have the time in the show. You need to make sure you're giving enough information to people who don't know the Dream Team, and not too much information where the people who do know about the Dream Team are bored. So you're walking that fine line of like, what's too much and what isn't. And I think that's always a balancing act when you're looking back and telling something archivally.
That's really interesting from a creation perspective of like, the first episode was actually the last to be created, which is really, really cool. You never
last
think of it that way.
Last to be finished. Many versions of it, but it was the last to be like, that's where we're landing.
Right. Yeah. I wanted to ask about the end credit sort of sequence that you guys had with Wemby saying the league better watch out, or the world better watch out next. Is there a potential for like a Court of Gold 2 in 2028 with, it being in LA and all that type of stuff? Is there potential for a second part to this thing?
It's not my call. I'm a cog in the machine. However, I think that basketball is ripe for that kind of programming, because when you have something that everyone around the world can latch onto, it's rare that it crosses country boundaries. Right. And basketball does. So when you have a tournament that's going to be probably the most competitive ever in 28, because this one it was competitive, but the USA still won. 28, I think, is going to be like, there's going to be 5 teams that could win it, and it's going to be close. Yeah. So I think it's ripe for some sort of ancillary programming and some sort of doc around it, whether that's Court of Gold 2 or something else. It deserves it. And not my call, so hopefully that happens. But yeah, I think it would be a smart move for a lot of people involved.
We got to get Jake in there.
There you go. And I got to give you a good idea. And I was actually curious as to if this had been thought of women's basketball, thinking of the women's gold run in the Olympics. Had that been considered for this documentary and using it as a foil to the experience of the men, or had that been considered for future documentaries?
Yes. Words and Pictures was working closely with the women's team last summer. And I think that the hope is that the women's game has never had more eyes on it. And rightly so. It's an awesome game with a lot of amazing personalities and a lot of just the talent is unbelievable. So now is a good moment to get that out there and to seize the moment and really take it to the next level and make sure it stays at that next level and doesn't just have a moment and go down. So I think there is a world in which I think a lot of people want that. And so I hope that it comes to light because it could be very cool.
That would be very cool because it feels like also internationally there's so much talent there on the women's side too that it's grown. Jake Rogal, thank you very much for joining us here, creator of Court of Gold. Incredible Netflix doc. If you guys haven't already, I mean, spoiler warning for this whole thing, but you probably know. You're sleeping under a rock if you don't know what's going on. Jake, thank you very much. As always, Zena, myself, and thank you to Dave DuFour. Thank you for listening to The Athletic NBA Daily. We will see you guys next time. Take care.